Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einem neuen Frosted Games Livestream Q&A. Das heißt, ihr könnt hier live eure Fragen stellen und hier geht es natürlich um die Kampagne zu Earthborne Rangers. Und mit uns dabei ist Andrew Navaro. Hallo Andrew. Hey Andrew, how are you doing?
Hi Ben, I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, fine. I mean, it's stressful, but it must be even more stressful for you.
It hasn't been too bad. When I get tired, then I start to feel the stress a little bit. But no, it's just it's a lot of work. It's way more typing than I could have possibly imagined.
I can only tell. Ich sage mal kurz auf Deutsch. Wir versuchen jetzt das so zu machen, dass wir, wie auch schon in der letzten Woche, das Ganze auf Englisch zu halten, aber ihr dürft natürlich eure Fragen auf Deutsch stellen und ich kann sie dann einfach übersetzen. Und ganz wichtig, wenn ihr eine Frage habt, wenn ihr also sagt, Ben, ich habe das nicht verstanden, so gut kann ich nicht Englisch, sagt das doch nochmal auf Deutsch, können wir es genauso machen. Ihr schreibt das dann einfach rein und dann kann ich das Ganze nochmal auf Deutsch wiederholen. Ich denke, das ist so das Einfachste. Das ist so der Vorteil, wenn man live dabei ist. Wenn nicht, ihr könnt euch das natürlich auch im Nachhinein anschauen und auch dann noch eure Fragen stellen und dann können wir sie gerne nochmal beantworten, gar kein Problem. So, let's start. I think the best way to go out, we had already a couple of questions on our Discord. There were some that were a little bit more general and like more directed to you, but we'll start with the real questions. The first one is Earthborne Rangers is in a valley, of course, and it's a remote location basically. It's modeled around the Rocky Mountains, I think is what you said. Yeah. So that's even remote now. Is there plans for like the bigger world in which Earthborne Rangers takes place, where you say there's like a bigger city, so we see like true Solarpunk city, or is your plan to keep it more nature related?
My plan for the setting is, if there's enough interest in it, that will explore, other parts of the world. So I really wanted to start narrow, like in a single spot, and then slowly spread out from there. So we have some ideas about like what the surrounding cultures are like they're relatively close neighbors, in the relative sense. It's still a hike to get there. But you'll meet some of those characters in the course of the game, so you'll get a sense of like what some of those other cultures are like and what their living arrangements are, like if they live in cities or where they live or what they're up to. That'll be a lot of fun. But I think long term, my hope for it is that there'll be enough love for the setting and enthusiasm for it where creative people from around the world, might contact me and have ideas about what they feel like their part of the world might be like at this point. And they could then offer their vision for what they feel like a hopeful version of the future looks like, in their country. And I think that would be very cool. Long and short of it, there are cities. We do have ideas of like some pretty awesome like sci-fi-ish places in the world. They do exist, absolutely. But yeah, right now we're focused on the wilderness and exploring this small corner of the setting.
Yeah, the feedback we got already was that people are really digging the fact that it's something hopeful, something light, something great. As much as I also personally love the Arkham horror setting. Yes, it's in the past, but there's a lot of like doom and gloom around. I mean, be it in TV shows, in movies, it's always the utopian Star Trek feel is what I always call it. That's not around a lot.
Right.
Especially after in a post 9/11 world. At least that's what we had when I studied like culture. So this is like the heavy influences, and it's really cool to see something lighter setting, to see a hopeful setting, to see something that's nice.
Thanks. It's fun to imagine. I got to tell you, it's like you said, that most of what you'll find out there in media is the opposite. So there's not a lot of outlet for you if you're looking for something different. That's also, science fiction and adventure-y, right? Like I feel like being able to imagine this place has been really great just for me mentally, especially over the past year and a half.
Absolutely. Then we have another question. Did you ever? Well, that's more like campaign focused. People like the vegetable plastic of the tokens. Did you? Was that something that you really planned for, or did you always have something like an option with wood in mind, or was it like I want to do something that I would do when it's in another game? We would use plastic, but let's use plastic that's not oil-based, basically.
Right. So yeah, there's a couple things that went into that. So I like wood components in games. I think they're really nice, especially custom cut meeples and other little things. I like Caverna is one of my favorite games. I love all of the little vegetable cut pieces of wood in that game. They're adorable. And the little sheep and cows and dogs. It's delightful. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in exploring wooden components. But what I've seen, is that wood doesn't really compare very well to vegetable-based plastic when it comes to sustainability, even if it's FSC wood. And I was really just not at a point when we launched the Kickstarter to be able to say, hey, we're going to do wood tokens, because I really don't know if we could make them sustainable, just how expensive they'll be. They'll be pretty pricey, I feel. So we're going to continue to investigate that, as we're going to continue to investigate all sorts of materials as we move forward. And if wooden tokens become something that I feel like we can do, then we'll offer them. The other part of it is that I'm really interested in exploring the capabilities of vegetable-based plastics, because ultimately I would love to be able to cast miniatures in that plastic. So right now, from everything I understand, they're not quite there yet when it comes to trying to match the quality of like a styrene plastic or even the PVC. So we're not there yet, so we can't quite do that yet. But I'd like to do some essentially some experimentation and learning about that material. So that really went into my decision to offer these tokens as an add-on during the campaign. Not only because I think they'll be cool in the end. They're going to feel nice. I'm not going to offer anything cheap and that doesn't feel nice to play with. And if we find that they're not, then we'll figure out something else to do. But it's really just so I can learn more about that process, and then we can take that information and then move forward with it and do even bigger, cooler things.
Yeah, it's a pretty, I would say, difficult subject, right? You embarked on something that's new, that's always scary and difficult. Yeah. And figuring out how to do it best is, it's a long process. Did you have any experience in that region? Especially I think in a company like FFG, it was probably separated, that you had someone who was doing all the costing, quoting, and or is it something where you already had experience with?
Oh yeah, so I've plenty of experience with that. A lot of my job, my job never really went away from that world. I was very involved with looking at quotes, approving quotes, budgets, margins, things like that. So always very in touch with the production department, either directly or through the people who were under me. But even before that, before we ended up, separating more and more, and we got, larger and larger, being a part of production discussions was just something that happened, all the time. Because I was on the kind of like the decision-making quality control committee for years and years, before I even became head of studio, like over a decade. And, we'd always be talking about those types of things. So I've learned a lot about that process and about all the costs involved. So yeah, lots of experience with that. But obviously, the experience is only good by way of comparison to the things I'm trying to do now, because everything I'm trying to do now is different than the way we did things there. So I'm taking that knowledge and that information that I got along the way, and applying it to what I'm doing now. But it's a very different world when you're putting sustainability and quality and sustainable materials first before profit and margin. It's the opposite from the approach that we took before. So it's a new world for sure, even though it's a familiar one.
Okay, that is cool. We actually have a real question for the Kickstarter. It says, in the regional shipping stuff, is there any chance of South America being one of the regions?
So not now. So part of the reason why I went with limited shipping for the Kickstarter was, to try to do a reduced, carbon emissions thing. But as you know, like I also included Australia in there, largely because I know that there's a lot of interest in Australia, and and they're out in the middle of the ocean. So if they're going to get something, there's really no other option. But part of it is also just simplifying fulfillment. This is our first Kickstarter. If I were to offer, shipping all over the world, that just drastically complicates the question of fulfillment. And I know that's something that has been really difficult, especially this past year, where there's been a lot of frustrations from people backing Kickstarters who haven't been able to get their products, their products delayed for months and months and months. It's caused lots of anxiety, not only for the backers, but exceptional anxiety for the creators, who went into the process thinking it would be one thing, and then they've gotten to the end and they found that it's something entirely different, and it's costing them so much money that it's really kind of bleeding them dry. So so I really wanted to try to mitigate that by, there may be some people who are disappointed that they won't be able to get the game through the Kickstarter. But I think the trade-off, I think, is a good one. Like in the end, the people who are going to be backing the Kickstarter, I think we'll be able to count on fulfillment, especially if we end up meeting all of our regional manufacturing stretch goals. We'll be able to count on fulfillment a lot more easily than they would if the game were manufactured in China and trying to be shipped all over the place. So it's really about trying to provide peace of mind for the backers who can support it now, and also make it so that it doesn't make all my hair fall out when it comes time to fulfill the product.
That is, well, we can only hope that the whole world situation has, been a little bit, it's gotten a little bit leaner and not so mean at like it's at that moment. It's just crazy. It's literally the worst possible moment to deliver any game at this point.
Right. So it'll be a while till we fulfill. So roughly a year from now. So so hopefully things have improved by then. For everyone's sake.
Absolutely. That's we'll see. Well, here in the stream we only have two more. Well, it's basically, he says, I just want to quickly pop in and say how excited I am for this game and the vision. So thanks, Peter. And also Damu Zamari, who says, I'm very stoked for this game. Thank you for making such a promising game. Love the campaign and all the videos so far. Thank you. Always good to hear.
It is good to hear.
If you have any more questions, guys, put them in the chat. I have a couple of questions more from our side, but keep the questions coming if you want to join in. I'm asking something that I also asked basically off stream already. One of the biggest questions we had was, why join the campaign now, especially for a German backer? Because so far there's no exclusive content, so people can say, what's with that? Why should I join the campaign?
What is with that?
What is with that? Exactly. That's the biggest question.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like I can answer that. So yeah, there's no exclusive content just because I wanted to try. I wanted to make as genuine a campaign as possible, and it's kind of the same reason why there aren't component stretch goals for the game. Is I just want to make the best game we can. No amount of money is going to change that. There's nothing I'm going to hold back behind a stretch goal. I'm just going to make it as awesome as humanly possible, and the game is the game. So the same thing with the exclusives. I want you to be able to. I want everyone, once these products hopefully become more generally available, to be able to get all these things. And I feel like we'll have even more things available after the Kickstarter than are available during. But I think if you're asking yourself, why should I back this campaign? I think if all you're interested in is just having a copy of the game, then yeah, I'd say there's probably no great reason for you to back it right now. I think that's totally fair. As we're going to be releasing the game in German through Frosted Games, so you'll be able to get it when that day arrives. But if you're interested in supporting the mission of Earthborne Games in general, if you're interested in helping me to build my company, and provide resources so that I can, continue to do, even bigger and better things. That is the best reason to support the Kickstarter, because we're not a giant company. It's not like I have a giant reservoir of cash that I'm sitting on, and I have all these resources at my fingertips. My resources are my personal and professional connections, and beyond that, I don't have a lot. So, so every dollar that is spent on this campaign goes toward helping to make Earthborne, helping me to get my feet under me as a business, and it's extremely important. So if you believe in what we're doing, if you believe in the company's mission, then the best thing you can do to support that is to back the Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I think I wanna repeat that as well. We've said it. I said it on the other stream I had with Hunter and Friends already. It's obvious that when you support or when you buy the Frosted Games version later on, it's obviously that we will make more money off of that than you will, and well, makes sense. Yes. So the important thing is what I said is if you say that you love the idea and that you love what Earthborne Games is doing and what's happening with Earthborne Rangers, then please support it now on Kickstarter, because for that very reason, because every dollar you spend, every euro you spend is basically helping the actual development of the game. It's not, as I said, the people are not used to seeing a real Kickstarter anymore. It's not that you actually help develop the game. People are so used to seeing like a finished game presented all around, the whole vision prototype sent out to, 50 content creators where they're already playing what seems like the final game. And then, but even then in the background, you see there's still a year of development going into these games. It's just for marketing's sake, basically. Mm-hmm. But this is a real Kickstarter where every backer actually helps the game come to life. It's not a set thing this is still going to happen, and it's just a marketing ploy basically to help make this game.
Absolutely.
So if you believe in the vision, join the Kickstarter. That's what we say. We have a question. Hi, Andrew. Very excited about the campaign, and I love the vision. How much of the rules might change during the next year? And will you be open to hearing like player feedback on certain aspects?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been developing this game for over a year and a half. So the rule systems have gone through a lot of changes in that time. We play tested a lot with external play testers over this past winter, and got a lot of really great feedback out of that. And I observed a lot of things that I thought were working well or not working well with the game. And then we made another very significant round of revisions. at this point, we feel really good about the core rules. Obviously, like I think if I didn't feel good about that, then the Kickstarter wouldn't be running. So the core rules I feel like are in a very, very good state. I mean, during development, things always change a little bit. There'll be tweaks here and there. Like there might be some core rules that are slightly revised. But the structure of the game, especially as you've seen it played like on live streams, that is pretty set. The bulk of the playtesting that we'll be doing here, that we're going to start up again in the fall, will be around the card content. And if anyone's familiar with card game development, and I'm something that I'm very familiar with, that goes on nonstop from the moment playtesting begins until that game goes to the printer. So that's really where playtesters are going to be able to be the most helpful. Is not in critiquing the core rules. Like obviously, if we find a problem with the core rules, it'll be very obvious, and we'll be able to fix that. But what we really need are people who are in there with the card pool, making cool decks that try to break the game. Trying to find like weird infinite combos between different card abilities, and kind of like making sure you're going and pushing all the buttons in the campaign and making sure you're discovering all of those cards and interacting with them, so you know the cards that work, the cards that don't, the cards that feel right, and the cards that don't. All that feedback is something that external playtesters really are the only ones who can really provide that. As developers, it's much more difficult for us to see, and we don't have the time to dedicate to that level of scrutiny and creativity. Like just watching the Team Covenant live stream this past Monday, they played that game in a completely different way than I expected, but they had a great time with it regardless, and it was really awesome to see them try to do what they tried to do, and they didn't do very well, but they had a lot of fun. But it's not how I would play, because I have a very clear idea of like, I know how all the pieces fit, so I have foreknowledge of everything. So I definitely have an unfair advantage against the game when it comes to playtesting. So we will be absolutely be reaching out to people. I've already had a lot of people reach out to me and ask to be playtesters. I'm building a list, and once we're ready to start playtesting again, we'll be doing that through Tabletop Simulator. So if you're interested, you can send an email to info@earthbornegames.com and just say I'm interested in playtesting, and we'll make sure to add you to the list, and we'll reach out when the time comes. And very long answer, very short. We're very open to feedback.
It's really funny. I watched the stream as well, and I thought it was super interesting because one of the, I think, most interesting things that happened was that they basically fell prey to, I think it's called signposting. They focused hard down on the story texts and wanted to do something because it had a story text and the way it was implemented. So it's like, oh, there's a story text, so we have to focus all our attention on this because there's going to be story there. And it's super funny because it was not like the same way we played. It's more like, oh, interesting. We're going to and we're trying to follow the mission, and cool. If we go there, this is something we can unlock. This is how we played. And they were like, jump on it, pounce on it. It's super interesting, but that is something that where that the signposting can happen, and you see something and you're drawn to it, and could be like a rabbit hole you're going down that actually seeing what you're happening. My feedback is only tune the Blue Mountain. I keep getting pummeled by remove one trail token. This is killing me.
Just shuffle that deck better. It'll be fine.
Definitely. There's a question that's actually harkening back to the first question we had. Because of the positive outset of the game, have you become more positive yourself while developing the game? I think it's a cool question.
Yeah, and yes, I was chatting with a friend over text a few days ago, and yeah, it really occurred to me that working on this game has absolutely changed the way that I the way that I think. And I feel like in my adult life, I've been constantly trying to improve myself in all sorts of ways. And this is the first time I've really tried to focus my creative energies on something that is positive and hopeful. If you're familiar with the work that I've done, I can wallow in misery just as well as anyone else. So like trying to consciously, actively envision a bright future for humanity and the Earth, and putting myself in that mindset, absolutely changes your outlook, and it just invites invites a much more like happy energy into your body, and it's real. Like it's pretty cool. So yes, 100%. It has changed me for sure.
This is a very good question that is also, I think, going to relate to all other languages. The question is, will the German and English version that are produced in Europe be released at the exact same time? That is an interesting question.
Yeah, we'll see. That's my plan.
Yeah,
I think we'd all like that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always a question of, I think we discussed, we could talk about this. We discussed there's always there's different approaches to developing and co-publishing and licensing different languages. There could be I finish my game and I'll try to put it out as quickly as I can approach, which is fair and square. There's plenty of games where we have to do it like that. There's other games where I want to say you're streaming the production. I could say, but basically you're getting little pieces that you can start, and you don't have to wait for everything to be in place. So, for example, I could start on the whole story text, and then come the card, and I could already finish translating that and doing so. Basically, that when everything is done, all the language things are done. Something like that happened, for example, with our version of Clash of Cultures, where we got piece by piece, and the German and the English version will be out on this at the same time. That's it's going to happen, and it's great. And I think we discussed this, that the plan would be to try to get the different parts in order so that we can do that and have the German and English version release at the exact same time. But yeah, as always, I always say that for us, at least, quality is paramount. So if we say, no, we need more time, then we need more time. It's never going to be speed over quality for us.
Correct. Yes. Same over here.
This is a very good question. Just as a side note, the first thing I will do when I play Earthborne Rangers is petting the sheepdog. Will there be more pettable animals?
Yeah, so I mean that's a great question. So so the sheepdog was something that really came to me the last time I was in the Rockies, which is this past March. We were out for a hike, and someone was there with their dog, and then I was like, oh my gosh, why have we not made the sheepdog yet for the shepherd? That seems like a really smart thing to do. But I know that if the only cool animal we have is the sheepdog, then everyone's just going to be fighting over the sheepdog. So the goal is that we'll have options, like lots of other cool things. Like there could be another kind of like animal companion, like a sheepdog, or it could be like a cool like little device robot thing, or we'll have a cool thing for every background or specialty that you'll be able to point to and be like, ooh, I want that. That will hopefully appeal to the different people in your group. But if you're all dog lovers and you all just want that sheepdog, then you might have to fight for it.
By the way, this is the first game due to the intermingling of flavor text and action, like effect text. This is the first time that I felt that especially like petting, when I read the text, that you pet your dog and that you say this and the action is called pet, and then you have the flavor text, and then what's happening with that. That was really deep. I was actually surprised how it completely took me in. It seems like, why haven't we done this before?
Yeah. That idea came to me last summer when I was working on I think it was like the second version of the game. And there were a couple interactions that were happening that were cool, but they were just kind of missing something. It's like it's like you needed someone to explain to you what the cool thematic thing was happening, because it was a little kind of cold and mechanical. So I just experimented, and I was like, I just had this idea to format the actions that way, and it worked. So I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, and I did all the text formatting. That's hardly changed in the past year. But yeah, I had the exact same thought after I did it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Why has no one done this before? It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's giving you exactly like the thematic interconnectedness that you need when you play a game like this, and especially since it has a lot of story. It's just, that's what I'm doing. It's like you click on a button, like an interaction button in a video game, and say, that's the interaction I want. That's what should happen.
Yeah.
Another question, as deck building seems to be like creating a character in a tabletop RPG, is it built into the game that you can name your own character? Is that something that the tracking sheet has?
So my original version of this had what amounted to like a blank character where you could write your name and also use like your own piece of artwork or like whatever you wanted to use for your character. So I've been thinking kind of in the back of my mind, like doing something like that, where it was like a blank version, maybe on the back of the roll card, like where if you wanted a roll, you could either use the artwork on the one side, or maybe you flipped it, and then you could fill in information there on your own character. But I think at the very least we'll do something like in the campaign tracking sheet, because you'll want to, in some way, record your deck list. You'll want to keep track of that, just in case something terrible happens and like you're walking along and it all goes spilling all over the place. You'll want to remember what was in there. So some way to name your character in that way, for sure. But I have my eyes open for ways of maybe doing that in a more traditional tabletop role playing. Here's my character portrait sense that we could maybe do down the road.
That's another question. This time about the game. Do you think there'll be more options for deck creation in the future? Is it since the expansion Ranger cards are mostly for upgrading?
Yeah. So what I was saying before the campaign started was, just based on how the campaign goes, like that will determine, like we were talking earlier, that will determine a lot of what we will be able to do and what more we will be able to do with the game. Clearly, the game is built for expansion. So, we have the campaign expansion offered with the Kickstarter, but it does not need to stop there. But yeah, the reason why we're leaving out expanding the starting pools or adding new specializations or backgrounds, leaving that out of the campaign, is just to, again, kind of help simplify like what's available in the Kickstarter. There's been a lot of questions about because we have this thing called the Ranger Card Doubler, which I really liked the idea of that, because it allows you to buy another set of player cards without generating all the waste that's incurred by buying another core set, because you don't need all the cards. You just need those cards. So I think it's been good in that way, but it's also caused a lot of confusion. You're like, what is this thing? Like, why isn't there one for the campaign set? So originally I had thought like, oh yeah, we'll also do a doubler for the campaign set, but I was like, that's going to confuse people. That's just too much. I'll just leave that out. And we'll just focus the campaign on mostly adventure content. And then that character progression stuff that doesn't, require it to be for you to have multiple copies. So because we're going that route, that really opens the door for us to deepen those card pools in the future through expansions. Though there'll be, Ranger card focused expansions where you'll probably just get Ranger cards in those. So, there may be an expansion that introduces a whole new specialization and a whole new background. We have ideas for more of them. So I have a really cool one that I really want to do is that would probably be like one of the very first expansions we do. But, that'll be, year and a half, 2 years down the road at this point. So we'll do more Ranger cards. We'll hopefully like fill out those decks. I feel like the way the Kickstarter is going, I feel like it's a given that we'll do some more expansion stuff that's not existing in the Kickstarter right now. But obviously, we'll finish all the Kickstarter stuff first before we dive into that particular pool.
Definitely. There's a cool lore question. Is there something like factory animal farming in the world of Earthborne Rangers?
No, there's not. Well, it's hard to say. Like, I think that. So again, I'm on 2 trips ago to Colorado. So like going to Colorado into the Rockies is like something I do annually with my family. We go hiking out there, and since airplane travel has been restricted, this past summer we drove, and part of that drive was going through a stretch of land that was just factory farms, and it was so hazy and hard to breathe, and just it was like driving through a morass of poisonous gas. Mm-hmm. If like, I'm not a vegetarian, but that really made me second guess things going through there. It did not seem like a good life for those poor cows. So I think like when I think factory farming, like that's what I think of. So in that respect, no, there is no factory farming. But there are other cultures, right? So like the culture of the Valley, they're not necessarily farmers in that way. Like they do a lot of like foraging, living off the land. They do some agriculture, but it's not really on a really wide, kind of industrial scale. It's all very non-invasive. It's all very in harmony with the surroundings, and they've settled in places that have abundant food sources. So they do eat food off the land, like berries and nuts and all sorts of like delicious things, and you'll have a chance to eat those things as you play the game. But they're also fisher folk. They eat a lot of fish. So fish is an abundant thing for them, so that is a very primary food source for them.
Putting onto that lore question, there's an art and a lore book in the Kickstarter. How in depth is this? Explaining the lore of the game. How much like text content? How much story is there?
Yeah. I want it to be very in depth. Personally, we have tens of thousands of words written in our lore documents. So much stuff that like it's like trying to bring it all to the surface during the course of a campaign is going to be very, very difficult. So that's really where I want that work to appear. So I think what you should expect from that art and lore book is something very similar to a tabletop role-playing game campaign setting book. There'll be lots of like cool descriptions of the important places in the valley, the characters there, what they're up to. There'll be stuff that is about like some other places in the world will hint at some of the other civilizations and other things going on. And we'll have a lot of like I think fun in-world fiction. Sam and I really enjoy writing that stuff, so we'll make sure to have a lot of that in there. And then, just big pieces of art, and there'll be some art in there that won't be in the game. So there'll be some exclusive pieces that you really only be able to see in their entirety there. And same thing with the card illustrations. A lot of the card illustrations we're making are pretty big, but then the art window is ends up being kind of small. So you're going to be able to like experience that artwork in a much fuller form by having that book. If the art and lore is something you're into, then you will absolutely not be disappointed. It's going to have a lot of awesome stuff. If you're familiar with anything that we've done, me and Sam Gregor Stewart. Sam Gregor Stewart was he's a current RPG manager at Edge Studios, who's a RPG studio, and he managed the RPG studio, the RPG team at FFG for many years. He wrote all the essentially wrote and edited all the Star Wars RPG books. He worked on all the 40K RPG books, and I worked on all of the World of books that FFG did, the World of Arkham Horror, the Investigators of Arkham Horror, the World of Android, big lavish productions that have a ton of lore. So if you're familiar with that stuff, then I think you can get a good sense of what we're going to try to do, what we're going to try to bring to you in that 96-page book.
Very cool. That's something I also always dig. I was one of those people who bought video games when they still had these, lore sections.
Yeah.
Got home on the bus from school and then just, ripped it open and read all the stories. I still remember that from my first StarCraft game where I just read a 40-page story that was in there.
Yeah.
I really love that. A personal question. Are you a big science fiction reader? And if so, what are some of your favorite sci-fi novels?
I don't know if I'd say like I'm a big science fiction reader. I've read plenty. I think Neuromancer is one of my favorites. I really love that. By William Gibson. It's a classic. I really like The Golden Age not the Golden Age, The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. Mm-hmm. I think that's phenomenal. Obviously, both of those are kind of cyberpunk-ish, cyberpunk novels. I like those a lot. I reread Dune recently, just a few months ago, just to kind of refresh my memory on Dune. That's an interesting book. I liked it a lot when I was in high school. It's got some really cool stuff in it. That I was really digging through the middle of it, but then the end kind of becomes this mess. So, Dune's all right. And I really liked the Old Man's War series. I guess I have read a lot of sci-fi. I really like the Old Man's War series. I think that's a really fantastic series, especially the early ones. And the first few novels of the Expanse series I thought were just so cool. Yeah. I kind of fell off in the fourth one because I feel like they introduced just a couple too many protagonists. But the amazing thing about those books is, where it starts to where it goes is just so mind blowing. By the time I got to the end of every novel, I was like, what did I just read? Holy cow. Like, what an amazing roller coaster ride. And then it just doesn't stop. It just keeps escalating. And it's really phenomenal. One day I'll read all those. But for now, I'm kind of stalled out on book 4.
Did you
see those
the
are very
TV
cool
series?
Too.
I think it really, you got that sort of.
Yeah, I read the books first. So when I watched the TV series, I tried to watch it. I watched that first episode. I was like, not really. This isn't what I want. I want the books. So I'd rather not contaminate my imagination.
This is how I felt with the books. I thought it started off like meh, and same with the series. It captured that feel pretty well. It was like so. Okay.
Maybe I should give it another shot.
I should always read Ursula Le Guin. I think that's always for the story as well.
I read Left Hand of Darkness maybe like 30 years ago now. It was very good, but I don't remember much about it. But I remember I enjoyed it.
Well, that's a good question that's actually tying into that. A good thing with Ursula Le Guin. Are queerness and gender identity as present in Earthborne Rangers as, for example, in Android Netrunner or Legacy of Dragonhold?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the vision I have for the future is where a lot of the questions and anxieties we have around inclusivity, culturally or otherwise, like they're just not issues in the time of the future. We've really kind of gotten past it all, and everyone just accepts everyone for who they are. So yeah, I mean, it will absolutely be present. It's not really a game that's like really focused on like romantic relationships or anything like that. So it may not come to the surface in ways that are like really satisfying if that's what you're looking for. But I think part of what I wanted to do with allowing people to create their own character is that you can embody whoever you want in the game. It doesn't limit you in any way, shape, or form. So I'm hopeful that like as you're and I've had thoughts about like having, because I'm a big RPG fan and CRPG fans, and a lot of those games have like romance threads that you can follow. So believe me, I'm tempted to try to like have some sort of like romance option in the game, but again, it's not really the focus. So to me, it would probably be cut if it felt like it wasn't really working. But my hope is that you'll create personal connections with the people that you meet in the valley, and that you'll come to care for them, and that you'll be able to tell at the table, like you again referencing the Team Covenant stream. We're not really trying to like beat you over the head with a lot of narrative. Like we have a lot of narrative things to do, but there's so much room for you to fill in the blanks as far as like what you're doing and participate in the storytelling. So if through play it feels like, oh, this feels like there's kind of like this romance happening with this character because of the way the cards are playing out, then that option's available to you. So yeah, long story short, I mean, it's not a focus of the game or the setting, but it's certainly a thing that that we all of us as creators care about. And Earthborne is founded on on compassion and mindful thought. So just know that it's in our minds, and we want to support you and who you are, and let you express yourself through the game as much as possible.
That is so no spouse cards for your deck where you upgrade.
I had thought about it, like part of, so when we were looking at character creation, like I had these like essentially like questionnaires in mind, like where you're building your family history and things, and when we eventually do the Earthborne RPG, straight up tabletop RPG, like all of that'll be present, I'm sure. But in the card game, it was just too cumbersome, so we had to simplify it.
Makes sense. We have a very good question that also comes back to the game. Saying, I still have not understood the Ranger card doubler. Who needs it? Do you need it as a solo player? Do you need it if you're playing with two players? Tevik, das ist a German question. Sag mir Bescheid, ob du die Antwort dann nochmal auf Deutsch genau brauchst.
So long story short, you don't need it. So if you're playing as a solo player, you don't need it. If you're playing two players, I would say you don't need it. But there's always a but. It depends on how you like to play. So the core set supports 4 players, top to bottom. You can play 4-player game out of the core set. You don't need any extra cards. But if in your larger play group, you would like some more options as that 3rd or 4th player, then you probably want the card doubler, because in the core set, as people are choosing their backgrounds and their specialties, as you're sitting there kind of waiting for them to finish, you'll watch all of your options steadily disappear until you will have what is left. So as long as you're fine with that, and I think a lot of groups will be, I hope they are, because you'll be able to create a very well-rounded group, and I think you'll have a really great time. If you're fine with that, then a core set is all you need. But if, as you're creating, you want to continue to have more options in front of you, then having that card doubler will will allow for that. So what it really allows for also is like more advanced play. So if, back to the question about the sheepdog, like if you're like, well, let's like if you're there with your friend, like, oh, let's both be shepherds so we can both get these dogs in here. You're going to need the doubler because it only comes with one set of dog cards. So it's more for advanced players. It's more for larger groups. If you're just coming at it casually and you just want to like play the core set, absolutely don't need it. As a solo player, don't get it. The only reason to get it as a solo player is if you want to make decks and never break them down. Like if that's something that you're into, you're like, I just want to have these decks built and I want them all in this thing and I want to just be able to pick what I want, then you might want the doubler. But as far as content goes, a solo player does not need it at all. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so now I should give a little short translation.
Sure.
Die kurze Sache ist, nein, wenn du Solo spielst, brauchst du es garantiert nicht, weil du aus allen Karten wählen kannst. Was da drin ist, ist einfach nur der doppelte Satz von Karten. Das heißt also, schönes Beispiel, was Damisumari gesagt hat, wenn beide Leute ihren Hund haben wollen, ne, wenn du jetzt zu zweit spielst, zum Beispiel, es gibt ja nur einen Satz Hunde. Das heißt, also sind 2 Karten. Und wenn beide den haben wollen würden, dann bräuchtest du das, weil es, wie gesagt, nur einen Satz Karten gibt. Aber normalerweise ist das Spiel so ausgelegt, dass du halt deine unterschiedlichen Rollen, deine Hintergründe und so hast. Und an der Stelle, wenn du halt zu viert spielst, ne, dann bleibt für dich halt nur noch das übrig, was die anderen nicht gewählt haben. Und du bist sozusagen so ein bisschen eingeloggt. Also dann könnte man sich durchaus überlegen. Und wenn du jetzt ein fortgeschrittener Spieler bist, der sagt, ich möchte mein Deck genau aufbauen und so, dann wäre es vielleicht sinnvoll, weil du sagst, alles klar, ich habe die Option einfach nicht, die der andere hat, logischerweise. Ne? Aber du hast natürlich auch trotzdem noch einen großen Pool. Also wenn du Solo spielst, brauchst du es garantiert nicht. Und wenn du zu zweit spielst, nur dann, wenn du sagst, alles klar, ich will Min-Maxing quasi betreiben und will sagen, ich möchte diesen einen Kartensatz, den sollen beide Spieler haben aus Gründen XY, dann bräuchtest du das. Aber wenn du sagst, du spielst Casual und hast einfach nur Bock zu spielen, dann ist das unter keinen Umständen notwendig, auch nicht zu zweit. Yeah, that was that question translated.
Thank you. I went on a little too long. I'm sorry.
No,
I should give opportunities to translate in between there.
Do we have another question? So far, well, maybe you can go back to another question we had earlier. Let me see. That was, I want to say, more personal. Well, I can ask the question that I got yesterday. Why did you start off with an customizable card game? I may not say the other word.
Well, a few reasons. I'm a lover of all sorts of games, but I really love I really love card games and the cooperative card game format. So I felt like we could do something cool and different with it that really hadn't been done yet. So that was a big part of just creatively. I think it's a lot of fun and. Like I was talking about the development process for card games before. It's so fun. Like it's very different than a development process for like a board game where you're just kind of like sitting down and like hammering at the same things over and over and over again until that thing is into like a nice chiseled form, and then you make it. It's much more subjective with lots of moving pieces. And it's more about the feel than it is about the math. Though math, still plays into it, of course. So when I was imagining, if I get to make one game, if this is my one shot to make a thing, I'll let me just try to get all the things I like into it as much as possible. So the role playing portion of it, and then the card game portion of it. Kind of mash those two things together and then go forward with that. The other part is wanting to make it sustainably. So making a card game sustainably, in my mind, was going to be much easier to do than trying to do a big board game. I'd love and I plan to do big board games down the road. That's 100% in my mind as something that Earthborne Games will do. But I wanted to start somewhere where I felt like we could do it, like we could hit the mission, and we could try to make a game as sustainably as possible. And I knew that making cards was something that we could do domestically without a whole lot of issue. So so that goes back to the regional manufacturing thing, wanting to be able to not have to go to China and be able to like go to Europe, go to the US or the UK, manufacture there. We can all get FSC cardstock. So that factored into it a lot too. Just the relative simplicity of the production was a major factor.
I can understand that. We have another log question that I think is really, really cool. In Earthborne Rangers, society seems to be past a lot of our present-day challenges. What are the challenges that the people in the world of Earthborne Rangers face? So what's their deal?
Yeah, that is a great question. So and this actually, will speak a lot to like what you'll be doing in the campaign and kind of the central narrative. So a lot of what the people of the far future are dealing with is still contending with a lot of the consequences of the decisions that their ancestors made. It was us. So, while the generational projects, the things that their ancestors did to, pull the Earth back from the brink of destruction, while they were successful, they weren't all of them particularly. There were some of them that were very, kind of short-sighted. So a lot of things that were like, hey, let's fix this thing now, but not a whole lot of thought given to what happens after. So the people of the future are still kind of contending with some of the decisions that their ancestors have made and trying to, continue to caretake the Earth because the Earth healed over time, but there's so much that is like man-made, so much that humans have contributed to the preservation of the Earth, that those things also need some amount of caretaking or decisions around what's natural and what's not. And when those choices that their ancestors made kind of like come into conflict with their daily lives, there's some fun science fiction things happening about, what does it mean to be a part of the natural world? What is the natural world now that it includes all of these bioengineered creatures? I don't want to talk too much about it because I feel like I'll just start to go into spoiler territory. But I'm trying to there's a little voice in my head trying to keep me from saying too much. But yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of it. And so yeah, there's going to be some fun meaty sci-fi topics that we'll get into, and that's the fun to me of sci-fi, is being able to explore some philosophical topics a bit. So we'll be doing that. But a lot of the game is really just really, especially in the first campaign, really just getting to know the people of the valley and what they're doing and what their daily lives are like and what challenges they encounter just in their daily lives is trying to do stuff. It's a pretty wild world they live in, with a lot of crazy things going on. So and they're all kind of inherently curious and explorers, so they get into lots of trouble. So a lot of what you'll be doing is is either helping people who kind of get in trouble on their own, or people who make some decisions that maybe lead to some consequences that they didn't expect, and you have to help them clean up their mess. It'll be a lot of fun. There's a lot of adventure to be had there, and I think there's a lot of fun themes to explore. And the more we get into it, the more that stuff's going to come out, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it all come together in the months ahead. That's good.
I'll probably be trying to not get bitten by crazy otter hybrids. it's always happening to me. I have 3 outro questions before we wrap up the hour. How does the you can't lose principle of Earthborne Rangers differ from like failing forward, like in the Arkham Horror LCG?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest difference, at least from my experience with the Arkham Horror LCG, is that like the failing forward in the Arkham Horror LCG always feels like failure. And there oftentimes your investigator is being injured and beat up, and you're essentially, by the end of the campaign, you're kind of limping to the finish line. So all those things to me, while you are failing forward, you need to be really invested in seeing that bad ending through to not just restart anyway. So while I feel like, it's not like a hard stop like it is in Marvel Champions or in like Lord of the Rings, the card game, where if you fail, like Lord of the Rings is probably a better point of reference, because that is a more story-based game. But you can't progress the story in the Lord of the Rings without finishing and successfully completing the chapter, and then you have to move on. If you don't, then you just have to restart and do it all over again. And I feel like we tried to address that in Arkham Horror by having that kind of that fail forward mechanic. But from my personal experience, when I play that game, I don't want to fail forward. I'll end up trying again and again and again until I do it right. So what we're trying to do differently then is we're not going to be punishing the player, the ranger character, in any way for failing. Like, you won't become less capable over time if you feel like you've failed a mission. So you're not really encouraged to restart in that way at all. The failure comes in, and I don't like to say failure because it's really not a fail state. But there will be narrative outcomes that you might, as the player, be hoping to achieve. Mm-hmm. And if you don't achieve those outcomes, then that might feel like you've lost, and you might be tempted to try it again to get the thing you wanted to have happen. But we're trying to engineer with the campaign in Earthborne Rangers is for when you maybe don't achieve that narrative outcome you were looking for, that instead of it, closing a door and you feel like, oh, well, then there's really no point in me continuing because I really wanted this to happen. It'll open up new opportunities for you so that you can then pursue something new that maybe wasn't there had you accomplished that goal earlier. So the hope is that you'll be engaged enough with the story to see it through, because you may have not achieved the thing you wanted to do with the narrative here, but that doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to maybe like have a even more satisfying resolution to that particular narrative element down the road. And also the I think, again, if you watch the Team Covenant stream, they kind of describe what failing felt like to them mm-hmm. At the end of that stream. It's a very long stream. If you want to skip ahead to the last like 15 minutes, you can hear them kind of give their summary. But to them, the failure felt like we didn't get to experience the things we were trying to. Like, we were trying to go do that thing and we just couldn't get there. And to them, that felt like, man, we screwed up because we didn't get that little story bit, and there was cool stuff there. There is cool stuff. They did miss stuff. Mm-hmm. So from like session to session, it all depends on how you feel and how you play. Like, if you're someone who's like, man, I want to go and grab everything, then I think you'll probably feel like you're failing a lot. Because it's not really made for you to be able to do everything on a single playthrough. Like, it's intended to create a lot of options, and that you can always come back later and try it again, or you can do it on another campaign if you don't find that one little thing that's out of the way there. So you might feel like you're failing a lot if you're trying to get everything on a single go. But then also the thing that they did is they kind of ignored the mission. So, the way the missions play out is that, some of them are kind of time sensitive. So they'll have different resolutions based on when you finish them. So we're going to be tracking the time that you're spending in the valley. Right now, a campaign is 30 days. So essentially 30 sessions in the valley. And there'll be things along the way there that will just happen regardless of where you personally are in the campaign, because we need to keep the main story going. But how those things and how you encounter them and how you experience them might change if you're able to hit certain goals before or after. There's just a lot of like narrative variability there. So again, you might fail a mission, and that might lead to like a not an objectively not great outcome, but it's not going to punish your character. It's just going to change the world. So if you really, really care about the world, which I usually hope you do, you might be tempted to try again. But I really, really hope that you just keep going, because it'll open up new opportunities, and we'll have taken care of the narrative in such a way where it'll feel like a really cool, satisfying story by the end, regardless of your journey to get there. So anyway, that's how we're addressing it.
Then I'll have a feel-good question. In your opinion, what's for you the greatest card game ever made, excluding Earthborne Rangers, of course?
Android Netrunner is my favorite card game of all time. Yep. Yes, I've been on record saying that many, many times. I love that game. I worked at FFG for the decade and a half. That was the only game that we made that ever hooked me in a way that games like hook fans.
Yeah.
When you work on games, when you're done with them, you're kind of like, okay, I'm done with that game. And whenever you play them, it feels like work. But I never felt that way about Netrunner. It was just a magical experience. And it was really fun just playing it in the office. So many people played it. We had like really awesome tournaments and things that we did with the staff. It was great, and I was hooked on that game for years. And it only really started to fall apart for me when the card pool just got so big that I couldn't keep all the face down things what they could be in my mind, and I just fell behind, and I really couldn't compete anymore. Not that I was a great player anyway.
It's my greatest pain that I do not have a complete collection. I'm missing quite a lot.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah,
but I made sure to take care of that.
This is it pains me so much. It is.
Yeah, it's a great game. If you can get it can be hard to find, but if you have a chance to get your hands on some of that, I highly recommend it.
I have a pre-order for like a whole cycle that's been standing for 3 years. I kid you not.
I don't know if you're going to get that.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, and another question actually that's relating to Android Netrunner. Will there be, or not Netrunner, to Android? Do you think there will still be like a sprawling board game, or is there still space in the like traditional board game publisher world for a sprawling game like the original Android board game? Something like that.
Yeah, there's definitely space for that.
Because there never has been like a second edition or a reprint or, doing that again. Was that for, does that implicate that something like that wouldn't work anymore?
No. So, I mean, I'm trying to think of the best way to
say something what you can say.
I'm trying to the best way to phrase this. The schedule is crowded, let us say. The development schedule is very, very crowded. So like trying to find, and especially once you have a bunch of licenses that need to be satisfied, it's really, really hard to find space for things like that. I have a very, close affinity to the Android board game. I think it was my last week at the studio. We did a live stream playing the Android board game, that was the first game that when it came out, like I asked my wife to take a picture of me with it because I was so proud of it. I was really proud of my work in that game. It's such a massive, ridiculous thing. There's so many systems and so many little bits, and it's completely inelegant, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. It is a really cool design, and you really can feel Kevin's love for that design when you play it. It's just so ambitious, and it's so his vision that it really comes through. And it was really great to work with him on that game. So I loved it, and I was head of studio for 3 years. So head of studio for 3 years, who loves the Android board game. You can fill in the blanks, and you can determine whether or not that'll happen or not.
All right, that's good to know. All right, these were the questions. I think. All right. That's it.
Great.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you, Andrew, for the great answers.
You're welcome.
That was, I think, a fun hour. And let's wrap it up. And I'll say a quick thank you in German. Vielen Dank für alle, die da waren. Ich hoffe, euch hat es gefallen. Und wenn ihr noch mehr solchen Content wollt, wisst ihr Bescheid. Wir versuchen gerne solche Sachen zu machen. Und sicherlich auch demnächst mal wieder ein großes AMA von unserer Seite, das wir natürlich als Podcast wieder aufnehmen werden. Und wir informieren euch, wenn es wieder soweit ist. Also vielen Dank und danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.